Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of the Culture Nerd Podcast. This is our second episode of the week in succession schedule, so you're going to see us every week, so get used to it. This episode, we're going to sit down and talk about, honestly, what just happened this morning. Dan Lin apparently is not taking the job at DC Studios. He was lined up to be chief. He was going to take over. He had big plans, and talks fell through at the very end. Turns out, they talked about salary, they talked about vision, they talked about everything, but the strings that they required, he didn't want to do. Turns out it's going to be kind of a weird thing, but it also shows their hand for what's happening. So let's jump right into it, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So,
are we big liars? Are we big liars? Did we do a whole show about lies? Are we living in a world of lies, Taylor?
So what basically happened, sounds like the breakdown happened just in between our last two shows. Like everything was ready to go. As you know, in Hollywood, they don't announce things like this unless it sounds like it's ready to go.
That's where I'm asking if we're liars, because I was like, if I thought this was at the touchdown mark.
Yeah, it was. It was at the touchdown mark, but turns out at the very last second, there were certain things that they required that he just didn't want to do.
You mentioned two other things. So he was down with the salary. He was like, oh yeah, this will compensate me. What was the vision? Has he talked about what they thought about, or was that what we were talking about last time?
It was kind of what we were talking about last time. Honestly, there's a lot of stuff that they talked about with what to do with this 10-year plan, essentially.
Okay.
Yep. And then thanks to Ryan, it happened on Friday. So we had our show on Tuesday. 3 days later, talks dissolved. And here it goes. And why did they dissolve? That's the big thing. So this morning, around about maybe 10 to 11, super early, they announced Boris Kitt and Aaron Couch over at The Hollywood Reporter. They dropped the news that basically what came down to it was that his commitment to his current production team. He has a current production banner called Ride Back Productions. It has a few other details with like nonprofits, a few other things. Long story short, it didn't mesh well with what they were wanting to do. Essentially, he would have had to give up a lot of those details, a lot of those things to take over this gig. And that's kind of what happened, was that he didn't want to let it all go. And to me, that right there is the biggest kicker, is if, say, for instance, a lot of people on the internet, a lot of scoopers are saying, oh, Zack Snyder has met with them. Zack Snyder's going to take over, blah, blah, blah. Like, none of that is true. Not a single bit of it is true. I talked to somebody as early as 3 hours ago, asking them 100%, hey, has Zach spoken to anybody? And they're like, no, he's busy with Netflix. He's happy with Netflix. That's still the most recent thing. Basically, what they were requiring of him was to basically let go of his production company. And sounds like he didn't want to let it go. And so anyone who takes over, right? So
I could see that, though. He built something there. Yeah. He knows that he's employing a bunch of people. They're going to work on all of the projects they want to work on. To walk away from that would leave it directionless, which is probably not true. There's probably other good people there.
Right.
But he's obviously the big guy there. So, yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and apparently CNBC reported after this, they confirmed flat out that Lin is 100% no longer in contention for the job, so they completely backed out. There's no silver lining that he could come back. There's nothing like that. Like, that's it. It's kind of crazy.
Is this the worst job in Hollywood? Is this a position that we're going to hear? Are we going to now hear 5 more names get thrown about that are going to be, oh, they're pretty close and it's going to fall through, and up, they're pretty close and it's going to fall through?
Well, isn't that the weirdest part about it, right? I mean, you have, let me see, right here, and they were committed to other things, could have had a stake in it, but others hadn't got the cash money. Yeah, so a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes. Ryan. Again, Ryan, anytime you want to pop on here, I will send you a link right now. If you're mowing the lawn again, you can take a break.
Yeah, you just have to mute us in between your blades cutting the grass.
But no, the reality is that the situation, they can't really juggle like all those hats. And people are like, oh, Zach's going to take over. Zach owns the Stone Quarry production team. If there were some of the things that broke up this deal would have been, oh my God, seriously, I'm legit mowing the lawn again. Ryan,
this is his weekly routine. This is what he does. We kibitz and he mows the lawn.
He pops on and mows the lawn as we're
He does a lot of these things. He does a lot of like, oh, there's a squirrel. He says that a lot.
All right. Well, I'm going to send you the link anyways, Ryan, because one of these days you're going to just be like, okay, fine, and pop on.
All sweaty and manly and ruggedly from being outside.
So the reason why I want to get Ryan on here is because Ryan actually spoke to Dan Lin. He's actually, Ryan, long story short, has a long history with Warner Brothers as a whole. He's worked on DC properties. When he went down to Warner Brothers, the Burbank lot, Dan Lin was actually the guy who toured him around the lot. So he actually knows him, which it's such a bummer because I was actually really looking forward to it. I really liked the idea of Dan taking the gig. I liked everything he was presenting with what he did with Justice League Dark. And it kind of just seems like it sucked. But like I said, with this whole situation, if someone like Zach or Debbie were to come in and take over the gig, which is why it's so unlikely, is because they would have to let go of the Stone Quarry. They would have to let go of their production company.
Outside of Hollywood, who's in DC publishing? And I know that these things are supposed to be, separate and they interact with each other, but they're supposed to be. Why not get somebody as, the editor-in-chief of DC looks at all the stories and makes sure that, everything kind of works together. Why can't we send somebody from that side to think about this universe that way?
Because honestly, last time that happened, Jeff Johns came in and fucked up Justice League. Like, that's the reality, is that a lot of these people are really good at what they do in the corner that they're in. But the moment they make that transition, unless they've had prior experience in it, it just doesn't work. Jeff Johns never made the healthy transition to film and TV. And when he started making that transition, it went downhill fast.
Okay. So then I know that we talk about the head of Marvel all the time, right? We talk about Kevin Feige, but where does Jon Favreau fit in that conversation? Because I feel like he's had his paws on so many of these great things.
So Jon Favreau...
Who are the great directors who aren't doing anything that we could be like, all right, J.J. Abrams, here you go. Here's your 10-year thesis that we're going to give you. What would you do with Superman and Batman?
So, I mean, right now the guy who's running DC is Jim Lee. And Jim Lee, despite the fact that he runs DC's creative outlet, he's also still drawing comics for them, which is pretty rad. He doesn't have any possibility. But, I want to bring someone else in to bring into the chat. I got my buddy Dawson here from the Four Nerds, Nerdy in Many Ways. I want to hear what you have to say about this, because this whole thing is insane. Because, like we said earlier, this deal was at the 1 yard line. Mm-hmm. And it's no different than the Super Bowl when he chose to throw it or he chose to run it. And for whatever reason, they fumbled before they could do either. And that's what happened here.
I was just about to say that exact same thing. Russell Wilson threw it, the slant, and it didn't quite work. Got picked off. First and foremost, hi, Michael. Nice to meet you. At least
hi, Dawson. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure as well. It's good to see you again, Taylor.
Yeah, you as well, buddy.
But I wish I could say I was surprised by the news today about Dan Lin. I wish I could. But at the same time, like, as a DC fan, what else is new? Right? I mean, what else is new? Nothing goes according to plan. Not since 2017, and even before that. What's up, Andre? Andre, got to shout him out with all the work he's doing for Project Justice League, the Ultimate Cut right now.
Yeah.
Like, I just know for a fact, and I've already seen some of this. I already know for a fact that some people are going to start blaming the Snyderverse fans or all these people for
not
driving him away.
Single bit.
I know.
I had to go onto Instagram. Like, people were like, "Oh, the Scoopers are saying this." The Snyder fans had absolutely nothing to do with this.
Nothing at all. I mean, even you see in like the posts about it where they say like, oh, well, communications went down. It was all about the value that Warner Bros. Discovery saw in Dan Lin's production company. Like, it was nothing to do with that. Yeah. And I know some people said it as a joke, like, oh, they drove him away. But at the same time, like, some people are going to try to place that blame. But it's clearly not that situation.
No, to me, what I feel like this is, what we have now is, for better or for worse, we have Zack Snyder entering this notoriety that is almost very similar to what Donald Trump went through. Now we have anti-people that are in Snyder derangement syndrome. And then we have like crazy hardcore Snyder fans who like everything must be burned to the ground unless Snyder gets over it. Like,
they just want to make DC great again. I see it on their hats. They just want to make DC great again. There were so many good years, but they just want to make DC great again.
And mind you, DC was the ones that started comic books, like some comic book movies. Like Superman was the movie for like 3 decades.
The Snyder team, if they had their say, who would they want running this? Who are the people that they would know? They'll bring Zach in whenever they want to, but they'll also have these other visions. Who do they like?
I mean, realistically, I think that like someone like Alan Horn, if he wasn't like on the edge of retirement, he would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
But I always keep pitching Chuck Roven, because to me, anyone who takes over this gig has to be kind of bipartisan in a way. You can't. I mean, obviously, I love Snyder for what he did. I love everything that he did, but Snyder has a very distinct view of DC.
Right.
And that doesn't work in the broad scale of everything, because you have a creator that works one thing. And then you have, on the flip side, you have Michael Uzlan, who hated Snyder's work but did a lot of great work with the animated stuff. Right. So it's like, you need to find someone who's literally worked across all of it and supported all of it. And to me, that the only person I ever think who's currently there is Chuck Roven.
And to me, like, I think about it, it's hard for me to think of a name, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to find their own Kevin Feige. And Kevin Feige is an absolute admirer of the comics, especially Marvel comics. It's the reason why he's been able to make the MCU as successful as it was, despite the fact that some of the most recent stuff hasn't quite been great. But overall, he's developed something that no one's been able to do before, because of his love of the source material and understanding that each of these characters require different tones and all of that, even though a lot of the same cliches end up happening. But as far as DC is concerned, I don't really know who could be a DC version of that. I really don't know. I mean, you guys mentioned Jim Lee earlier, but I think he's perfectly content with comics. I don't think he wants to step into the film world at all. I mean, I know I wouldn't.
And it feels like you give up everything, because
exactly.
I would love someone like Kevin Smith, right? To maybe like have this idea and bring in some new blood, but there's no way a studio wants to doing a podcast where he smokes weed every week. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they have to keep this world filled insulated, because it has to satisfy so many different people's needs.
Right.
To Andre's comment,
I'm just going to say, Rocket's going to do it. No, but the reality is that whoever they end up getting has to be someone who, like you said, is willing to give up everything to do this, because you lose the ability.
They're not going to let you do projects. This deal shows to me that you don't get to do, right? It's the cliche in Hollywood. You do the one big movie a year, and then you get to do the indie movie. They don't want you making indie movies. Yeah. You make DC superhero movies.
What was that movie? Like big movie, art movie. Like, what was that movie where they made that like rant?
It's one of the good ones. It's one of the good comedies.
It's got to be something Kevin Smith, honestly.
It probably was. Yeah, maybe.
That sounds right to me.
But then Ryan's coming up. It's got, my guess is Berlanti or DeLuca. And I think, honestly, DeLuca would probably be my pick. And I say this because I know a lot of people hate Berlanti because of what he did with the CW. But Berlanti has a long-standing history of succeeding in DC properties outside of the CW. Right?
True.
The CW is, whoever took over the CW is really like, they did what they could with the pebbles that they were given.
Absolutely. What is the budget of a CW show? We're not talking about. We're not talking
I would
about
argue
Seventh
that
Heaven and Dawson Creek times, right? When television was in its heyday. CW today looks like they're eating McDonald's containers and stapling it on the wall sometimes.
Yeah, I haven't been a big fan of CW stuff since the early Arrow and Flash stuff. It's just been for me.
Most of those shows peaked at season 2 and then just.
Well, that's the pattern for CW, except for core stuff like Batwoman and stuff. Most shows peak at like season 1 or season 2, and then they're like, "Oh, let's keep this rolling," and then have this most ridiculous stuff we can possibly think of in the show. And
let's
so,
listen to the Tumblr fans.
Yeah, and like. I think Berlanti shares some blame for that, but I don't hate the guy, because I think he had some good things going, and he did do some successful things, like you said, Taylor. And so I wouldn't hate him being the head of it, but at the same time, I wouldn't love it.
Yeah. But
is Ridley Scott too old to take over?
Very much so. Very much so. As much as I love him, but
we can't have Wonder Woman fight chest bursters. That's not okay.
So it's funny because a lot of people in the comments are like, "Oh, not J.J. Abrams, not J.J. Abrams." And I honestly, maybe a decade ago, J.J. would have been a good pick, but at the same time, and the reason why I say this, because J.J. Abrams, when he's allowed to control from the ground up, he makes some great stuff.
When he actually plans.
When he
that's
actually
the
plans,
thing.
yes. When he's allowed to plan. Because what happened with Kathleen Kennedy and the Star Wars franchise was that he set up groundwork for a plan, and they kept cutting him down at the knees. Then they brought in Ryan Johnson, who basically was like, I like your idea. I like it, but I'm not going to do it. And then did his own thing. And then they didn't like what the other guy was going to do. So they cut that out and said, JJ, go back to what you did the first time. And he's like, so I have to retcon and continue. And you're giving me how much time? And like, so obviously it was, and they put him under a massive deadline too, because the movie had a set release date. So yeah, is what it is.
That's another reason why I think Jim Lee would absolutely not want to do that, because in comics, you do have deadlines with comics, but like you have so much more free reign with comics, whereas with like production studios and films, like I feel like that's in comic industry, you have a little bit of a knot tied around your wrist of things like restrictions. Like, okay, this is all you can do. We'll pull you away in case. But with films, it's much tighter. It's a much tighter knot around your wrist.
I love what Ryan said. I think the thing to look at is on paper what he did with DC and the CW when all he had was $4 in a dream.
Fair.
I mean, that's true. I mean, Berlanti made basically DC very accessible for people. And like you said, look at Crisis 2019. That budget sucked, but they still pulled off some amazing stuff on that thing. And that's kind of the thing about the CW is that it is kind of perpetually a dumpster fire, but it's also like a dumpster fire with a massive, tiny budget.
Right.
Yeah. They're able to.
What about Frank Miller? What's Frank Miller doing?
Frank Miller, I think the same reason that Zack Snyder wouldn't be the head is because much like Zack Snyder, Frank Miller is a very distinct and interesting view of DC as well. I mean, he's one of the main inspirations for Zack Snyder's way of looking at DC. And as much as I love Frank Miller as a storyteller, I think he's one of the most, if not the most influential comic book storyteller of all time. I think him as a head of it would be complicated because as much as I love him, he's got a lot of inconsistencies in his stories. And so I don't know how much I trust his ability to do that, but he's also starting his own publishing company. So I don't think he'd want to do that. He's doing what he wants to do with his own stuff. So,
and like, forgive me if I'm wrong. I mean, getting Frank Miller to do this job would be like trying to get Alan Moore to do this job. Like they have such a nihilistic view of everything. It's not possible. And didn't Frank Miller only direct like one movie? And wasn't it The Shadow? Not The Shadow. What the hell was that one called?
Dark Man?
No, The Spirit.
The Spirit.
And that movie was so weird. I mean, I liked it for what it was, but it was also like, okay.
I know that movie is
it was so weird.
That movie is not a good one. I do not talk about that movie in good company.
Yeah. Plus, you talk about like Alan Moore, like people call David Zaslav the axe of like Warner Bros. And all that. Alan Moore be that much more so. Like Alan Moore is very hard to please when it comes to stories.
There's no pleasing Alan Moore. He can't even please himself. He hates everything.
Like even when people adapt his stories into films, he can't even bear to be on the credits of the film because he's so particular about his stories.
Take my name off it. I hate it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
It's like trying to find a presidential candidate. It's got to be an individual, 35, got a couple years ahead of him, really get some ideas in there. And then they have
full of hope, not broken by the world.
And someone that hasn't pissed everyone off.
And it can't be Ryan Reynolds because they want to work on all their own stuff. So who are these people? And I don't want it to be The Rock.
Ryan Unicum, watch David Zaslav give David Binoff and DB Weiss the job. After they ran Game of Thrones season 8 into the ground, let's give them the brains.
I mean, aren't they still working? I mean, aren't they?
They're doing something, but they're not doing anything with Warner Brothers right now, right?
Okay. I'm sure they are fine. I'm sure their bank accounts are just fine.
Yeah, I mean, they worked on Game of Thrones. They don't have to work another day in their lives if they really don't want to.
Yeah.
Is there anybody at Netflix that wants to defect? Is there anyone on that end that we could get to like jump ship?
But that's the kind of the thing is that Hollywood is such a weird spot right now because we're in the post-COVID world where everything is really rocky. Streaming is really rocky because everyone put their money into streaming with the COVID, and then they found out that it just didn't really mesh.
It's so funny how people were like, "Oh, streaming is the future. Streaming is the future." It's like you can't sustain that with high budget. You couldn't do it.
There's not enough content in the world, and there's not enough content they can produce fast enough.
And there's only so much money you can charge people for streaming services before people say it's not worth it anymore.
Right.
100%.
Yeah. And it's funny because like I see a lot of names coming. Like, what about Christopher McQuarrie? Christopher McQuarrie is literally the same situation as everyone else. You're like, he will not give up his writing ability, his directing ability. He will not give any of that up to run a studio.
Yeah.
Eric Kripke,
What
the
if-
same thing.
What if we have to let him do his final movie, but then he never gets to direct a movie, but Quentin Tarantino just thinks about these stories and he's the guy that runs DC.
I don't want Quentin Tarantino anywhere near DC, with the sole exception of his pitch for The Question, and that's all I want from him.
Yeah.
Other than that, no. I mean his movies to me, and we've talked about this at great length, Michael. His movies for me are very hit and miss.
Sure.
I will love one movie and be like, why did I waste my time with that movie? Like he has this like rose-colored glasses revisionist history style of thing. And for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or whatever, is that what it was called?
Yeah, Once Upon a Time in
He's
Hollywood.
done it
Yeah.
multiple times. It is the new genre of which he likes to live in.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm trying to see.
Yeah, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was the last one he did.
Yeah, and that one, to me, that one could have been great if they didn't revise the history at the very end. I felt like changing everything in the last second was funny, but it didn't work.
A fairy tale.
It's a fairy tale, yeah.
But you knew it was a fairy tale. It's called Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
But I was still hoping that the fairy tale would have the true ending. I didn't expect him to last second be like, oh, by the way, Sharon Tate lives. Oh, by the way.
Allows him to bob and weave. That's what plays with your expectations. That's why the thesis of that movie is so great.
But at the same time, Inglourious Basterds was funny.
Oh, Inglourious Basterds was great.
They just went into oh, by the way, we also killed Hitler too. So I was like, okay.
And the way they did it so brutally too. It was
Yeah.
like, okay, this is fair. It's Hitler after all.
Yeah.
Got it.
I was like,
Well,
I'm
in
not
his
mad
next
about
movie,
this.
I'm sure he'll have Hitler show up in the third act. That way we can justify whatever murder happens.
Yeah. I don't know. But I'm seeing all these other names that come up. Let's see, Ryan
I don't think this is an enviable job. I think this is going to
No.
be tough, and I don't think they're going to fun. I think they're in a rock and a hard place. And I almost want to give somebody a no-name person and just let them try.
Yeah.
Just let them do something, because people have other styles, and it seems like they want this not Marvel style, but even the Marvel style now, it's like, well, what is it?
Yeah. And it's such a weird thing.
Right? It's like passable CG. Like, what is the Marvel style? I feel like they're still figuring it out.
You're
Awkward
absolutely right.
humor.
It's not an enviable job whatsoever. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, in order to bring someone quality that knows what they're doing and has the ability to fix what is the DCEU at this point, you'd have to compensate them very well, give them a lot of freedom, and just basically promise hey, I know there's things that are a mess right now. We guarantee you absolute creative freedom. We guarantee you that you'll be able to do whatever the heck you want. Because if they're gonna offer anything short of that, they're not gonna find anyone that's gonna be able to do a very good job. They're just not.
So, how far does this kick down the road production? Right,
Oh, so
every
it's so much further.
the longer this takes, you know what I mean? It's gonna be 2 years. Probably if they approve a script from the ground up. Now, I'm probably sure they have some scripts in the office that they really like and some stuff like that. But I'm saying this person's all their fingerprints. That's going to be a 2-year process. So
And they want a 10-year plan from this head of DC. And if they don't have a president yet, that means they still don't have that plan in place.
Exactly.
Which,
And that's what I keep trying to tell
they
people.
did have a plan, but it got canceled today at 10 o'clock.
But no, even then, even if his plan was good, they can still move forward with it.
Yeah.
But the reality is that you brought up Marvel. What Paramount was doing with Marvel, maybe. That's kind of what we want with DC. But what Disney has done with Marvel, not so much. Not so much.
Yeah.
It's crazy what a hit and miss it is as well, depending on the genre. Because I was totally into the Hawkeye show. That show I was totally fine with. But the same tone when put into the Miss Marvel show was a real miss with me. And for some reason, that one felt a lot like a Power Rangers episode. I had told that to Taylor a couple of times.
You brought that up a few times, yeah.
A monster shows up, they get a new power, the team fights together, Zordon tells them you're going to pull
Power Rangers.
That song would have been so good in that show. They just never got the rights.
Yeah. And I'll say it. I mean, She-Hulk has been on TV for 3 weeks now.
It's really fun.
I still have yet to watch it. I've seen so many clips that have just turned me off.
I'll probably get a lot of hate for it. I actually think it's a lot of fun. It's stupid, but
the
it's a lot of
worst
fun.
choice of the show is they allow her like Allie like to break the fourth wall,
Yeah,
which is a silly choice, but the actual show, it's paced very well.
I love the fourth wall breaking. I love in the episode 3 when she looks at the thing, she's like, all right, I guess she's like, don't worry, this isn't a guest appearance of the week. And she's like, but on the first episode we had Bruce. In the last episode we had Blonsky. On this episode, she's like, oh my God, are we becoming a guest of the week show? And she's like, oh no. And like it cuts back to the show. And I'm like, that was
for me,
meta.
like one of the main reasons I haven't watched it yet is just because like a couple of clips that I've seen, and also just the CGI.
It's
Good
weird.
Lord.
Yeah.
It's so bad. Just the clips that I've seen, I'm just like, I can't take it seriously. I'm an artist, so I'm a very visual minded person. So if something doesn't impress me visually, I have a very hard time overcoming that. That's why I have a hard time with this new Rings of Power show, because all the freaking elves, men have short hair, and visually that bothers the freaking crap out of me because it's not right.
Yeah. So, well, no, I mean, to me, and Ryan brings up, you're speaking my language more for time. Ryan, when are we going to do our Power Ranger show? We got to sit down and talk Power Rangers for an hour. You got to come on the show for at least for that. But no, with the Rings of Power, for instance, I kind of already answered a lot of people like, oh, what do you think of it? What do you think of it? I'm like, I love Tolkien's work. I have copies of the Silmarillion. I have the Hobbit. I have his unpublished poems. I have all that stuff. I love.
But this isn't Tolkien's work.
Exactly. And to me, what makes this show so hard to deal with is that they have his outline and they're touching all the bases with the outline.
Sure.
But they're also like not following it at the same time. And I'm like, watching it. I'm like, okay.
A $1 billion fan fiction looks pretty good.
Yeah.
But like, what it feels you look at the CGI of the show, the CGI and the set pieces, they look like Middle Earth. The characters, though, don't. The only one that looks like it to me is the Durin. Durin's the only one that looks like, okay, this looks like Tolkien to me. Everyone else, I'm just like, the woman that has a crush on the elf like warrior, she looks like she's wearing overalls and it's from like the 1930s. And then like the elfish warrior has like a fade haircut, and it's like, what elf is giving haircuts like that? What barber do they have in Rivendell? And like, and then freaking
you have no idea what Numenor offers these elves.
Yeah. Lord Elrond,
Filalar, the stylish,
and Lord Elrond is like a wannabe Steve Harrington in this show as a young kid. It's just like, what are you freaking doing?
It's really weird. But like, I liked the intro to the first episode when they talked about like Morgoth destroying the light. I'm like, that was straight out of the Silmarillion. I loved it.
Yeah, Valinor, Morgoth, like all that was good.
I was like, okay, cool. And then you don't see Morgoth, and I'm like, oh, why don't we see him? What do you mean he's defeated? Okay.
Yeah, weird. It's sad. It's sad that
you tease the greatest villain in Middle Earth and you don't even show him.
Right. That the hunger is there for all of these things, but it is the execution. And that you're gonna get put in a weird position where, because the rights just got sold, correct? Who bought them?
The Embracer Group bought them.
Yeah.
Great.
Which is weird.
What are they gonna do?
They're gonna do whatever the hell they want with it. That's what they're gonna do.
Right. No, and they get this beautiful example of what not to do, right? Like they're just gonna see what everyone else hates and just do the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. And so and I think it's one of those complaints that I see a lot of people like, oh, why are there all these why are there black people in Middle Earth? And like, I'm watching this. I'm like, I see your racist comments. I see it. But I also see why this is an issue. And I'm looking at it. I'm like,
a very specifically weird issue. Because the weird issue Tolkien's books are an allegory for things in countries that happened during World War II. Right. And he creates a whole world about it, which is why this is a weird thing about it. I understand Hollywood's point of it because they have these people. These are the people that they've been casting out for 5 years. Of course, we're going to put them in it. But I also understand why again, this is not Tolkien.
What is interesting to me is like, because what it does is that they try to match, like they have Alan Shore doing the music. They try to match the look of it from Peter Jackson. But then by adding all of these, by going like full on with just casting anybody and making a diverse cast, you then run into the wall where, okay, so in 2,000 years when the Lord of the Rings happens, where's the diversity? Did they all just get wiped out? Like you open a can of worms that either A, the later stuff is now not canon to this stuff, or B, something really bad is going to happen.
Yeah, but also there's an issue that I have with not just like, either the hair or like the fact that some dwarvish women don't have beards for some reason. It's the fact that you look at these characters and they're supposed to be ancient Middle Earth, like ages before the Lord of the Rings franchise, and yet it looks more modern than what the Lord of the Rings does. I mean,
Right.
obviously with CGI and visual effects, it's going to look more new, but the set design, the costumes, the makeup and all that needs to have a certain look to where it's believable. The progression of time is actually believable.
Well, I
Yeah.
think Taylor, I think you showed your hand, not our hand, but I think you showed their hand. I think this leads into a totally new Lord of the Rings movie.
Has
I
to
think
be.
that they're going to set up this world, and
Mhm.
then this girl is right. She's the woman. She's going to then be in this next. They're absolutely going to do it. And I don't know what that looks like. And maybe that's the revisionist history of Tolkien, and we get a Tarantino version of one of these
Right?
movies where things are a little bit different. But it's like, what is the end piece? Because you don't build. They've spent so much money on this. There's no way this
Like
is
$1
one
billion.
thing. If
Yeah.
you build these sets, you're going back to them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it's very weird because like I'm looking at this and yeah, they kept a lot of the concepts the same. Like the Balrog is the same, which
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it, I'm like, all right, let's see what you do. Let's see what you guys do with it. I will rate it out. It seems like because it's going to be shows. Obviously, we're going to go that route, and you're
Yeah.
going to adapt things. What you're going to adapt, but it also feels a lot like the Watchmen show in a way, where the Watchmen show, it wasn't quite connected to the comics, but wasn't quite connected to Zack Snyder's. There's this weird middle ground, but also it didn't really please anybody because it played neutral. You know?
Oh, okay.
Well, I think people are
that
pretty
show's
split on
great.
it. There's some people that really love it, and there's some people that were really
exactly.
annoyed.
What
Like
I mean is, it didn't please anybody. It didn't please the fans.
it didn't
of the
please
comics
across the board.
because it looked more like Zack Snyder's work. It didn't please the fans of Snyder's because it didn't follow any of that.
Yeah.
Whoever they were trying to appease, it just didn't work. They should have just done their own thing and just gone their own designs. And I mean, they could have taken any one of Tolkien's bajillion paintings that he made and adapted those more accurately than Peter Jackson did, and then people would have been like, okay, I see what you're doing. But to almost one for one copy things from Jackson, but then clearly make some massive deviations, it seems like a weird choice to me.
And also,
Weird
how much
facts.
was Peter Jackson involved in this?
He's not.
Right.
Yeah, that's a
So-
big issue.
It's a big issue. And, funny enough, Peter Jackson at the end of the Hobbit process was spent and they drained him of everything. They had to shut down production because he didn't have any more ideas about how to end the movie. So it's like the fact that they didn't want to bring him in on this project, I feel like it was already going to be a mismatch.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, I understand the random Tolkien fact. I was scrolling through TikTok of all places, and there's this really cool rare bookstore in Utah called Moon's Rare Books. And this guy has this great collection. He has this copy of The Lord of the Rings, and it has a letter from J.R.R. Tolkien to, I believe, someone from Cambridge University. They'd asked him to come and speak, and he had to decline because he was like doing all these different things, and he just didn't have the time for it. And I just found it fascinating. It doesn't necessarily correlate what we're talking about with, but it's Tolkien. But he said in that letter, I wasted 17 years of my life building up this world of Lord of the Rings. Kind of like really down on himself. It was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But the fascinating part is like the guy showed off the letter. The writing was basically if you took Elvish and made it into English, like the writing style. It was just really cool. Anyway, I thought it was a fun little factoid.
So, I mean, to me, what this show kind of feels like is the Hannibal show in a way where it's clearly not connected to the Silence of the Lambs, and they were planning on adapting the Silence of the Lambs into another season, but that's kind of what they're doing. I mean, if we do see them go as far as they might, and then readapt Lord of the Rings, they'll adapt it as like, here's Lord of the Rings.
It'll
book
be
one as 2 seasons.
Yeah, it'll be. Yeah, I didn't even think about it being broken down like that, but of course it would be. Oh,
yeah.
Also, the fact that the second season is not being filmed in New Zealand
seems weird.
Really bothers me because, like,
Yeah.
New Zealand is Middle Earth.
You think they're just going to go to green screens and it's all going to be on Disney
I think they're
sets?
filming outside London, I think is where they're filming the second season.
Seems weird.
Yeah, that's going to give it a really fake feeling.
Yeah. But I mean, isn't that kind of like the peril of the adaptations to begin with? I mean, we have what's happening with DC right now as a whole. To kind of get back on the subject is, DC just lost Dan Lin, and when you're in an interview process, right? When you are literally like about to hire somebody, the pen's going to the paper, like everything's ready to go, and every runner-up that is going has basically been told, "Oh, we went to someone else." you don't call the runner-up and say, "Hey, do you still want the gig?" Like, because at that point, their egos might be like, "Well,
Like,
you
oh, we
said no to
passed
me.
you
Why you're
up,
still
but
Yeah.
you
entitled?"
still want it.
They have to find a whole new crop
Yeah.
of people.
They
So
do.
they don't even get the 5 names they originally wanted. They maybe get 2 of those names. Maybe one of those people goes, "I understand." But you now
Whichever
have to
one had
get
the least amount of ego hit on
Yeah.
this thing might be like, "Yeah, maybe I'll give you guys another look if you guys are serious, but don't hurt me again."
right.
Oh my gosh, that's a really good point. That's
It's
because
super
anytime you're
weird.
in for a job, like, and someone says no, and they're like, "Oh, actually, never mind." Like, I've had experience with that where someone's like, "Oh, well, we don't really think you're a fit," and then later on, like, "Oh, do you still want the job?" And I'm just like, "Are you freaking kidding me right now? Like,
But I
are you
wasn't a fit.
serious?"
I wasn't the fit. Why am I a fit now?
Yeah, I'm just your last resort. Don't make me the freaking pity employee.
Exactly. Like, oh, I'm your silver medal.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Well, I don't think they want a silver medal. They're looking for a
Right.
gold medal, but I don't know who that person is, and I don't know who wants the job. I feel like there's a lot of great work. There's a lot of great work there, but I feel like there's some weird legacy projects. Whatever
Yeah.
this next Wonder Woman is, whatever this next Batman movie is going to be, whatever.
Well, do we even know that Patty Jenkins is attached to the third one?
Yeah, she's still attached to it.
Okay.
Yeah, but is she going to be is she going to be
No,
directing
she's still
it?
directing it. She's still doing
she
everything.
writing
The
it?
big thing is Jeff Johns is not attached to it, and that's
Good.
what made Wonder Woman 84 fall through. Was that Jeff Johns wrote that movie like a modernized version of the old show, and it didn't fit the tone of the first movie.
Right. At all, honestly. You can't really connect them unless, like, except for the fact that the same actors for Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman. Other than that, it's just
Taylor, you're not allowed to play with your toys when the guests are talking. You have to mute your microphone when you play with your toys.
Oh my god, it's still doing it.
I told you have to mute your microphone. I apologize. I usually take them away from him, but he was able to get them out of his box.
Oh my gosh. What was that, a toy lightsaber, Taylor?
I was literally just moving
It's
it. I
his
didn't
Millennium.
realize.
It's his Millennium Falcon.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Okay, I don't blame you for that.
I'm picking it up, and it's still going. What is it?
It's a great toy.
Good lord.
Just have it
Needs to
hanging
stop.
behind you as like a podcast prop.
Yeah. No, they're all like actual toys. Like,
Yeah.
they're all like. But
Ain't
no,
nothing wrong with that.
it's such a weird thing because, I mean, people are like, "What about Bruce Timm? What about Bruce Timm?" I'm like, yeah, but he would then lose his creative ability to do whatever else he wanted to do. It's like,
True.
has Kevin Feige done anything in the last decade plus other than produce these things?
I don't like the last batch of Jurassic Park movies. There's some fun stuff in it, but that team is now open. Who made those movies for Universal?
Well, I mean, Colin Trevorrow had a fantastic pitch for Star Wars before they cut him out at the knees. I mean, if he's a DC fan, maybe we could hear it out, but I don't know. Because honestly, it's like I said, whoever commits to this has to commit to this.
Yeah, and I
that's
feel
such
like
a hard sell.
they don't necessarily need to be a DC fan. I want them to be a DC fan,
They
but if
should be.
someone can come in there and look at this stuff with fresh eyes and connect with what people are connected to, I mean, I think that's okay as well. I mean, I don't know. I feel like these fanboys, the people that are on the tip of your tongue, we now have a laundry list of reasons of why they can't do it.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, then this person's going to be someone that we don't know.
If it does in fact become a guy who's not a DC person, they would have to be incredibly open-minded to what people bring to him and pitch to him, because he can't be somebody that just says no to everything, because if they're not a DC guy, they don't know if it works for the brand or not. They just don't know.
But at the same time, I get what Michael's saying, is that if they're not a DC guy, right? If they're not someone who goes in there with their own internal bias, because that's the thing, is like I said before, you have to work past your internal bias.
Right.
Which is why someone like Uzlan wouldn't be a good fit, because he clearly does not like Snyder fans and doesn't like the Snyderverse as a whole. Chuck Roven, like I said, he's worked on everything, so I think he's got a pretty good unbiased approach, but he's already getting closer to retirement age than any of the others.
Right.
You need someone who understands the medium, who understands the characters as they are. Like Superman is in the red and blue, Batman's in the darker colors. Like understands them as on a base level, but is okay to let people explore the nuances.
Well, I was going to ask our DC fan down here, what, as a fan, what storylines would you like to see be brought to the screen? If we're thinking about like, hey, there needs to be a Batman movie, a Superman movie, another a Green Lantern movie. We're gonna get Green Lantern in here, somebody else, and then this needs to culminate in a Justice League movie or Justice Society movie, whichever we want to go. What storyline would you pitch all that into?
Well, I just want a cohesive universe. That's all I want at this point. But as far as storyline, it's hard for me to say something other than like what I already know what was supposed to happen, right? Like a buildup of the Justice League, a buildup to a fight with Darkseid. I think what you could do if you were to do a new storyline for Superman is maybe do something along the lines of what's happening in Action Comics right now, where Superman goes to War World and he has the Authority that goes with him, and they fight Mongol and all that. I think that could be a really interesting sci-fi approach to Superman, and give him a chance to really show multiple sides of his personality, both the very generous and hope-giving side, as well as the brute warrior that he can be. As far as Batman is concerned, I mean, we just need to explore Batman's rogues gallery. I feel like with all the Batman movies that we've had, we've only scratched the surface as far as live action adaptations.
Well, and whatever the next Batman's going to be, we've had Ninja Batman, we've now had Mech Suit Batman. It will be some other version of that. And I don't know, that will dictate whatever that film is going to be.
Right, exactly. You'd have to, I think a large portion of fans really wants the type of Batman that's more in the main continuity. I tend to prefer more like Black Label stuff or like Frank Miller, because that's more grounded and darker and that's more my style. But as far as like main continuity Batman, that's kind of a safe bet. Like, oh, make this be like more the traditional Batman with the Batcave, with the Bat family, even though I'm not a huge fan of the idea of a massive Bat family.
The Bat family is a universe into itself. I feel like
exactly.
that's the other problem. It's got to just be
family.
Batman. Yeah, what
because
is
he's
it?
like, I'm Batman. I work alone, except for when I have like my 8 adopted.
That's my problem. Batman doesn't trust anybody, and yet he has like 20 people in his circle that works in his cave and uses his equipment. That doesn't make any freaking sense.
You have to understand, when comic books came about in the 50s, they were just trying to sell as many.
I know. I understand that.
I'll say this, though. The crazy thing is that the Bat family, which we literally call the Bat family, which sounds like something from the 40s, is still as popular as it is. That all of those characters still pretty much hold up, with Batman being the pillar, the linchpin that holds everything together.
Like, for me, they're all great characters alone, but I don't like, for me, I'm a big comic reader, and whenever there's a comic where all of them meet in the same room and like convene about something, I'm just like, okay, I don't like, have Red Hood be on his own, be Nightwing be on his own, be Batgirl being on her own, and kind of like maybe occasionally intertwine, but not like work together on a nightly basis. That's kind of my speed. But as far as like other stories is concerned, I like the pitch that's here in the comments from Michael saying Kingdom Come or Final Crisis. That'd be a big order to fill. You have to build up to that quite a bit. You'd have to, because you think of Kingdom Come and Final Crisis and all the characters that are involved. I mean, holy crap. That's like CW efforts of like trying to get all these characters in. And even then they couldn't get everybody. Yeah. So that's something you have to do like 20 or 30 years down the road, if you even can get that together.
And I think Darkseid's too big. I think whatever they fight needs to be something that like just threatens America, and then the next movie threatens the world, and then we get a little bit bigger. Listen, you can have anybody you want come and invade over, but I think it needs to be more focused. We need to like spend time with these people.
Yeah, fair. Although, like, I will argue that the first Avengers movie had armies of Loki and the Chitauri trying to destroy the Earth, and then you had Ultron trying to destroy the Earth. Then you had
Thanos. But Ultron is a series. But Ultron is a series of rooms. In Ultron, they go from room to room. They build Ultron in a room, then they're in that cage room.
True.
Then they have a conversation in a room. Then they have a dope-ass fight scene under a bell in a room. That movie is a series of rooms.
No, I agree. But what I'm saying is that, like, I don't necessarily agree with the idea of Darkseid being too big. I think Darkseid is the Thanos of DC. Of course, he came before Thanos. A lot of people maybe don't know that. But I think that's the perfect character to have them go up against. Either that or Brainiac. Brainiac's another great villain.
I personally think that whatever they do next, if they want to keep all of these people together, if you want to keep the Snyder cast, and you don't want to go Darkseid next, introduce the Crime Syndicate. Go full on multiverse and say like, oh, by the way, here's the anti-Justice League from their Earth, who are now trying to conquer other Earths. And then you can use that as a character point to like say, oh, these are what these characters are at their core, but if they're bad. So like you can have them look inwardly like,
Yeah, you get to do a bunch of origin stories like the Spider-Man multiverse movie, the animation one, where you get to like see that moment, but then it's not Uncle Ben that dies, it's your mom that dies or something like that.
No, I like that. I think Crime Syndicate's another good way to go. Again, that does take a little build up because you have to make your core characters in order to have bad reflections of them.
Was there ever a Batman where the mom just dies and the dad freaks out and trains him into like a child soldier, but he's got like his dad talking to him all the time?
No, there is
cool pitch.
it would be really cool. There's the Flashpoint one where both Martha and Bruce die.
And then there's the one where that's the one.
That to me I get like flashes of like somewhat part of Kick-Ass with Hit Girl and stuff. But also, like, I'm also thinking of like Leon the Professional in a way at the same time. Like, that's what I imagine with that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a surgeon. I can show you all the pressure points. But let's learn how to kill. Like,
I like that. Make that a Black Label story. Jim Lee, if you're listening somehow, like, please, that'd be great.
What if Martha
we
died?
See Dad goes on one mission. Like, it builds up to him actually putting on a mask and doing something. And he comes back and Bruce sees him all like bloody and stuff like that. And he's like, Dad, is this how you're going to do it now? He's like, no, we can never do this again. I can't change the world like this. And he puts it away. 10 years later, he's crying at his funeral. Batman puts on the outfit and that's where Batman comes. I mean, any of that stuff, I just feel like, whatever you want to do with it, show us the way and then make that thing real.
Shut up and take my money.
Sure.
I will say, though, when it comes to like, the problem that DC has as far as building up their universe is that in order to do a lot of these big stories justice, like Kingdom Come or Final Crisis or stuff, anything with Anti-Monitor or Darkseid or anything, you need to establish your characters. And the characters they already have, like Jason Momoa, he's getting to his 40s, isn't he? Gal Gadot's in her 30s, Ben Affleck's in his 40s, Henry Cavill's getting into his 40s. Right, you have your core Justice League members getting up there in age in order to build up to something. By the time they get to it in a 10-year plan, they're in their 40s and 50s, right? And they can still like look young-ish, but like there's only so much you can build to. So the problem they have is, we
have to get all new people.
You really do,
and that's probably part of this. You can't work on any projects. They need to cast 70 people. They need to. I mean, what is like? Right, it's 10 people a movie. Right, the Marvel method is the lead of the movie, a veteran actor, another like famous person, and then like a couple supporting people. Right, so it's like 10 people a movie. They need to do 3 or 4 of these. That's like 70 people you got to cast for.
Also, like you can't just jump to that right away because Jason Momoa's got a lot of fans. Gal Gadot's got a lot of fans. Even Batfleck and Henry Cavill, they have fans for their specific versions of their characters. So you can't just immediately jump ship because you're going to make the people who are fans of those versions bitter. So you have to make a transitionary period to like, okay, well, this is the new Superman. This is the new Batman. These guys have, done their work with these characters as far as they can go.
Sounds like you're talking about Flash reshoots.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what it is. I think it's funny is, Discovery is here to pinch every penny they can get. And they're not here to piss off the fans that supported these things. They were absolutely hear you and want to have this transition period. And it'll be interesting to see how they transition away, or if we see other universes, or if we see Superboy become Superman. I don't know, but I know, you're right. They got to get another batch of people in there.
Yeah, and slowly transition them to not piss people off. Because, again, they already have a divided fan base as it is. 100%. You can't do it even more so.
I think with this latest stumbling block that we've just had by losing Dan Lin, I think what they need to do at this point is, because they can't just sit around and wait, right?
Right.
As soon as they hire somebody, that's when the timer starts, and then, like you said, everything escalates from there. What they need to do in the meantime is keep people happy with temporary projects until they get the person in to do the 10-year plan.
Taylor, is the quiet part that they can't say out loud, but behind closed doors they go, man, we really shit the bed with Zack Snyder. And Zack Snyder had all of this image and knew what could tell you the next 2-3 movies he's going to set up. He set up 3 movies at the end of the Justice League movie that right at the
Any
end
of them with a brain is thinking that. They're like, oh,
they're probably thinking right now, hey, maybe what we should do, since we can't get a new person in charge, we can't get that ball rolling, we can't Like we have to either reboot
Finish
everything.
off these legacy projects.
Why don't we just get Zach to come in, finish his story, buy ourselves a few years, and then once that's done, then we do it. Like to me, that's what makes the most sense.
Because we're sitting here going back and forth of who has a vision? Who has somebody that can plot all these together? Oh, the last guy who did it.
And you know what
brought all
really
these
ticks me
people in to
off
do
is
it.
that when the Snyder Cut came out, I sat there and I watched and I was like, you know what? This would be, because again, it was during the pandemic when we got it, right?
Yep.
Nobody was making anything. And if they were,
the
there was a
world
lot of,
was gloomy. The movie's in black and white. It
Yeah, I
really
mean-
feels good.
well, it's like a lot of people weren't working on films. So I saw it that moment, and a lot of people did, as a situation where DC was like, okay, we've been struggling, but we got something out there that people are really liking. Let's use this as a jump starting point. And I think at this point, DC is past the point where they can take advantage of that.
Yeah.
Because I thought that was the pinnacle moment. That's where that was the decision time of, okay, do we
That's
continue
when
with
they
this or
should
not?
have done it.
Exactly. The business side of things, you look at it, you see all the people that are wanting the Snyderverse restored. You should have just brought it back, finished out the story, and then continue on. But of course, bitterness is a thing, and pride is a thing. And again, like you said, there was one person who had a vision and has a direction for it, and they're like, I don't know.
And casted about 70 people. How many people, if we put all together those movies, how many people make up all those casts? It's about 70 people, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure.
And I think what comes down to, say at the end of the year, say Black Adam is a massive success.
Right.
Obviously, it's going to get a sequel. Say Shazam 2 is a massive success. It gets its sequel. Say Aquaman 2 is a massive success. It gets its sequel. Say The Flash is a massive success.
Somehow.
Gets its sequel. I think it's going to be, honestly, because despite the fact that there's all that drama that we see on the Twitter and on the social medias and all this stuff, the reality is that most people on the streets have no idea about any of it.
True.
Not a thing. And
We are so plugged into this world of dropping news stories. Most people are unaware. Now, for good and for bad, because the bad of it is they go, isn't Ezra Miller that child groomer? Which is not true, but unfortunately,
That's the
what-
stigma against him.
Yeah.
right. But it's going to come out. People are going to love it to pieces, and they're going to be like, we want more. And so what they can do right now is obviously they have Alan Horn, who's there. I mean, fix my camera a little. They have Alan Horn that's there, who is clearly overseeing some things, and he's got all those connections, and he knows, let's continue this stuff. They move forward with just continuing those sequels. And then when they get the new guy coming in, then they wipe the slate clean with a proper Flashpoint movie where they reset everything properly.
Any chance the new guy's Ben Affleck?
I don't think so. I think he was so burned from the previous time he was there that there's no way he'd do it.
I mean, Ben's back as Batman for as long as they want him to be. It sounds like that's what the word on the street is.
Yeah.
But the reality is that Ben is pushing 50.
Yeah.
So,
and he's
we'll
with
see.
J-Lo, so like it's not, he's just like kind of living life right now.
I don't know. I mean,
He's living La
Having-
Vida Loca. I totally
having-
agree with you.
been married to a Latina woman, they age you faster than normal. Just kidding. But no, the reality is,
Oh man.
is what it is. But I think the reality is that this cast is getting older, and if they want to use them, they have to use them now. And then once the story is done, they should wrap the story, and then wrap that universe with the story.
The more they drag their feet on using these characters and actors, the harder of a problem it's going to be, because they're eventually, Henry Cavill's doing his own things. He's doing a lot of different things. He's rumored to be even in the MCU at some point. I don't know how true that is, but like there's a lot of stuff going around with him. He's going to be
The
doing
MCU is going to be so massive. He is absolutely going to get there.
Yeah.
Look at people right now who you think will never get there. They will get there because they're making 5 of these movies a year, and it's like I can't believe the people that they're getting for these movies now.
Yeah.
And you know what? What'd be really hilarious is oh gosh, hold on. I just had it. Who were we just talking about?
Henry Cavill.
Henry Cavill. If they cast him as Sentry in the MCU,
The rumors that
The
they're
biggest
actually
middle
casting him
finger,
as Hyperion,
that
Just
would be
popping
Sentry.
people's heads and stuff like that.
that would be the biggest middle finger to Warner Brothers. It really would. Like, you wouldn't let me play Superman? I'll play Superman over here.
Oh,
Yeah, I'll play the
Sentry's
Marvel's
dark.
crazy
It's-
Superman.
Yeah.
Basically, Homelander light.
Yeah.
I mean, people who've read the comics, they know Sentry was like, okay, Sentry's cool, Then he goes bad.
Yeah.
And he essentially becomes Homelander.
The guy
Right.
playing Homelander's only got 2 more seasons of that show. He'll be in the MCU. I mean, could he?
Yeah.
He looks like a great Johnny Storm to me. Maybe a little too old, but I don't know. I can watch him be smug.
I could see him being Doctor Doom, although I did see someone suggest that maybe Henry Cavill could be Doctor Doom, which I could see that too.
That'd be interesting.
Is Henry Cavill too tall? How tall is Doctor Doom?
Doctor Doom's a menacing figure. I mean,
Doctor Doom is as tall as
Please
you
don't
want him
refer to
be.
tall people as menacing figures. They are normal human beings, okay? They're just
hey, I'm
very tall.
6'5" and I'm not menacing.
I'm talking
okay?
about 7'1" at least.
But no, I think like the kind of the bottom line is that so Dan Lin didn't work out.
Mhm.
The 1 yard line, it failed, which sucks. But then it also means that it massively set back their plans because this was the person they put their plans in.
Mhm.
So whatever they do, either they continue what they're doing right now with whoever's in charge, they can just continue it. They hire someone interim, basically say, okay, you're going to just make sure that this next transition goes smoothly. And then at that point, if once they do have some, once they have that 10-year plan forward, they have to just recast and start fresh. Because there's no way it would work otherwise.
Yeah. Here's 2 names that my good friend Frank mentioned: Kevin Smith and Jay Oliva. I don't see Jay Oliva. I think he's too content with the animation stuff.
Yeah.
Kevin Smith, though, I think would be intrigued by it.
It's so yeah, and I don't know. Kevin Smith has a weird. People have a weird issue with Kevin Smith in fandom. You know, I'm part of it. He is the fanboy that got to do everything.
Yeah.
Yet people feel, you know, he's had running comic books and some to success, and other people don't like it. So
Yeah.
He also
don't
had the
know.
issue with the He-Man, or I guess the Masters of the Universe show.
I
He
don't-
had a lot of flack with that.
And that to me, I'll play devil's advocate a little bit on that one. That to me is the stupidest controversy because I loved Master of the Universe Revelation. I thought it was fantastic.
I like the first part. I haven't seen the second part yet, unfortunately.
Okay, if you saw the first part and you liked the first part, watch the second part because the second part is when everything is like, oh my God, this is what we should have had the first time. Because
Yeah.
this is literally when people were bitching about the first part, like, oh, why did they do this? Why did they do this? I'm like, just let him tell the story because he's going to stick the landing. And he stuck the landing so hard that I was like, yes. I was like so happy with how they landed that season because that second half, so good. It was like, I mean, mind you, Michael, you've known me almost our entire lives at this point. He-Man was always a huge thing in my family. Like my dad loved He-Man. I sat him down and my dad is like, he's like very anti, like, I don't like when they change things to make things fit for political agenda. Like he's very much like almost a step away from becoming Clint Eastwood and Gran Torino. Like he's right there. And I sat him down and we binged He-Man, Master of the Universe Revelation. We binged it and he was sitting there like this the whole time watching it. He saw when He-Man like died and everything. He saw that. He's like, okay. And I'm like, he's going to get pissed. I'm like, okay. And now Tila's the main character. He's like, okay. And he was just sitting there like stoic the whole time. And then when he finally ended it, he was like, they're making another season, right? That was amazing. And I'm like, okay, well, if you give his approval, let's give it Kevin Smith, give me more. And now that they're doing another season and they're actually, was it Hodak? Like that's who they teased at the very end. Like they're like, this is what we're doing. And I'm like, shut up and take my money. Come on, Kevin Smith. Give me more of this He-Man because this was awesome.
Yeah.
So, yes, if you liked the first half, if you actually liked the first half, the second half is going to win you over so hard.
I don't know why I still haven't watched it. I meant to as soon as it came out, but just
you can get through it in like 2 hours. Just
I
sit
know
down
I
and do
could.
it.
I know I do a lot of different projects and I get distracted.
I'm the same way. I've like noted streaming. I see it. I go, oh, there it is, and then I click on something else every time. So
it took me
totally
so
feel
long
you.
to get through Sandman, even though I loved it, but because just I was doing other things, you know, and so it's everybody else is watching all these shows, and I'm just sitting here like I'm so freaking far behind. It's like insane.
But no, like it's a funny thing. But I think that's kind of where we should honestly wrap it. I mean, we've gotten so many tangents, but the reality is, I think the bottom line that we all agreed with is Dan Lin leaving sucks.
How far? Yeah, and how far down? This pushes things back 6 months at least.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Minimum, right? Like minimum. Even if they sign somebody next week, nothing happens overnight.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless they have someone who walks in with like PowerPoints and like posters and like, this is my plan.
Like,
Right.
even if they have like scripts stashed away, like they still would have to go back through them. They'd have to hire writers to go through
Yeah.
things and make it fit into one cohesive vision.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you'd have to do so much work that you just
Yeah.
cannot do in a short amount of time.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Is like it puts them back at square one, which sucks, but it is what it is.
Mhm.
And whoever they get, God, I wish them luck, because at this point, the fans are now so volatile and so divided that you're gonna piss off somebody. There's no neutral
Yeah.
figure in any of this at this point. So whatever they pull off, I mean, Dan Lin was almost the most neutral person you could find, and then someone found a snippet of him making a joke about the bots comment, and then everyone's like, "Oh, he's the devil. Let's burn him at the stake."
There
And I'm
was
like,
even another Twitter page suggesting that he called Zack Snyder the C word, and I'm just
he
like, there's
didn't
no
though.
way.
That wasn't real. That
Right.
was
There's
one
no
person.
way that he said that about a fellow creative.
The guy literally said, the tweet was like, "I have it on good authority that he called Zack Snyder this." I'm like, then why are you the only person saying it?
Exactly. I saw it and I was like, there's no way. This is just to stoke the
Like,
fire.
knock
and get
everything
people
over.
ticked
Like,
off.
this is stupid.
Flip the tables.
But no, I think in the meantime, they should bring back Zack Snyder to finish his story, buy us a few years, and then at that point,
It's so true. They could literally just give him 3 movies and he'll wrap all this stuff up, and then you can get somebody else to get a whole new cast. He'll kill him off for you. He loves doing that stuff. He'll do it all.
yeah, he's like, Jimmy Olsen, good, kill him.
I mean, we already know in his vision that Wonder Woman and Aquaman would die. We know that Shazam's nowhere to be seen. Like, we know a lot of people died.
And then we know that after all
How
that happens, they jump
does-
back in time and redo it all. And then the redoing timeline, Batman dies. So
How does Aquaman power work? When Aquaman dies, does the Highlander soul go into another Aquaman? And
the
what makes
quickening
him
takes over
Aquaman?
Mira, and she gets struck by lightning and absorbs his essence.
Does she kill all the other mermen
There can
because the
only be
lightning
one.
killed everyone in the water?
Oh my god, I don't know.
Okay.
But no, bottom line, this is actually a pretty crappy situation, because in the 11th hour, crap hit the fan. We lost the closest thing we had to anything cohesive in a very long time. They have to start fresh, and it's just going to cost them more money at this point. And it's going to be a
Just
mess.
another day of being a DC fan, folks.
I mean, that's what we're used to, right?
I feel bad that every day is like the end of Return,
Expect disappointment, and
Empire
you will never be
Strikes Back.
disappointed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. If you want to support what we do and you love what we do, head over to patreon.com/theculturednerd. Support us on any one of the tiers. Anything that you can help us with, it goes a long way. So, and thank you those who are supporting us currently. We have a handful of people that do support us. They always text me. They send me messages. They always ask thousands of questions, and it's awesome. I love interacting with everybody. I've been your host, Taylor Murphy, my co-host, Michael Santel, my longtime friend of 30 plus years. And for all the haters, he's not going anywhere. So stop telling me to find a new co-host. You all can suck it. He is not going anywhere. Thank you again, Dawson, for coming on.
Absolutely.
You're welcome anytime. That was a load of fun. And thank you for joining us. If you're on your TV, scan that QR code. If you're at home and listening to it on Spotify, then there's got to be a link somewhere that you can find our main hub of links. But thank you all for joining us. Have yourself a good night.
Peace.
bye, everyone.